So good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this Workforce Wednesday webinar. My name is Kirsten Bayer with the Illinois Center for Specialized Professional Support at Illinois State University, and I will be your moderator and technical support for today's webinar. Today's session, we are going to be discussing motivational interviewing, so thank you for joining us this afternoon. We're so thankful that you could fit us in your schedule this afternoon. Hopefully there's not any bad storms where you're at, so feel free to type in the chat. Let me make sure that's available for everyone. Where you're joining us from this morning, or just saying good morning or good afternoon, excuse me. Usually we do these in the morning, so I apologize. A couple of housekeeping things before we get started. So again, my name is Kirsten Bayer. You can feel free to reach out to me via email or via the chat or Q&A for any tech questions or follow-up questions regarding today's session. I'm always happy to help everyone. And then just some housekeeping items. Today's session is being recorded. The recording will be up on our website and on the Illinois WorkNet website within about 48 working business hours, so typically by Friday morning. You will receive a follow-up email tomorrow that will have the URL where you can access the recording and the PowerPoint slide deck. And then Richard, our presenter today, is also going to provide us a handout, some resources to go along with that. The presentation and the handouts will be up on our website as well within that 48-hour working hour deadline. So be on the lookout for that. All the information will be in your follow-up email tomorrow. You will also receive a follow-up survey tomorrow that you can access. We ask that you take a couple minutes out of your workday to go ahead and take that follow-up survey. I am a part of the WEO Professional Development Committee with all of the titles. And so we do help the Professional Development Committee come up with and facilitate and find presenters for and content for these Workforce Wednesday webinars. So we open your comments. We're open to your comments and suggestions of what you would like to see or certain sessions you would want more information on. We would love to get your feedback on that. And then just really quickly, we want to do our beginning Workforce Wednesday webinar polls. So we would like to know, where is your local area? And then also, if you scroll down, which partner do you best represent this afternoon? We also do have closed captioning on for accessibility reasons or even just for note-taking purposes. So you should be able to turn that on if you would like. I'll give everyone a couple more seconds to answer the polls here. Also, along with the follow-up survey, I will put it in the link to the follow-up survey in the chat following the session right before we close out, just if you want to take it right away. I know that I'm like that when I watch a webinar. I'm not going to take a follow-up survey unless it's right after I watch it. So I realize that some people are like that, and so I always try to do that as well. And I'll put a plug in for it at the end of today's session. Okay, so I'm going to end that poll and share the results. Looks like most of us are joining from Central Illinois, but we have a good span across the state, actually. So we have good representation across the state of Illinois. And then most of us are joining from other WEOA partners and stakeholders. So maybe some of our frontline staff or LWEAs, and then Title I and III as well today. So thank you for joining us and spending this afternoon with us. We do appreciate your time, and hopefully you'll be able to learn a lot from this session. I'm going to hand it off to our presenter. I'll stop sharing. Our presenter, Richard Rutschman, and let him introduce himself and kind of his background and what we're going to be discussing today.
Yes, it's my pleasure to be here today. I've spent my career doing work as an educator. My doctorate is in adult education, and I've worked particularly here in Chicago with vulnerable populations. I came as a VISTA volunteer, and that was 45 years ago. And I found techniques, approaches, and ways of helping people that I felt were really valuable. So in my role at Northeastern Illinois University, I got myself to be a trainer in motivational interviewing, just because I felt that's a very powerful tool to have when people need to change. So I've enjoyed the role over the years, and now I'm happy to share with you. So I'm going to start by sharing the screen here, and let me just get started. Let's see. So let me view this in the right place. All right. All right. So I guess we'll skip this because you already did some of this, which was introduce yourself and put your name in the box. So let me ask you these questions. So do you feel that it is your job to be helpful, right? And for the most part, and solve people's problems. And that's what we usually feel in human service fields, regardless of what they are. We want to help people, and we're doing our job well when we feel like we're doing that. But then sometimes do you worry about you gave them the right advice, or maybe you take it home as like, I wonder about that, or you get burned out by dealing with everyone else's problems and people that are stuck, and you just feel like if only they would do this. Sometimes you feel you're at a loss. How do I help people? How can you know what's best for them? Because sometimes we don't know them, right? We don't know what their circumstances are, and we're trying to give them advice, and or they seem like they're totally unmotivated, and so you're like frustrated that you want to help them and they don't seem to be, and you'd love to have some tools to better communicate. And so I think you're in the right workshop. So what I'd like you to do is, if you could share quickly, just in the box, what are some behavior change issues, or decision making things that they need, the people that you work with and your clients or students or participants that they have. So if you would be willing to share a few of those, we'll look at what are some common behavior change issues that your clients face, and maybe we'll look at what those are.
And I can help facilitate too, Richard.
All right, so I'll let you do that. So we'll come back to that so we can move on. But I'd like to sort of get a little sense, so as we get into examples of what that could be. So how do we help people solve their problems? What are some common ways? If this were an more interactive, I'd be wanting to get this feedback from you. But it tends to be that we're pretty directive. Often we want to tell people, we want to prescribe, manage, and it's perfectly okay, when you want that sometimes, right? You go to the doctor and you want them to tell you what to do to solve your problem, prescribe you the medication, and tell you do this and you'll get better. On the other hand, if it's something that's going to cause you great behavior change, life changes, then you may not just jump to doing that. And doctors find that a lot. The doctor says you need to stop smoking, and or whatever it is that you need to cut back on, do more exercise, whatever it is. And that's easier said than done unless you want to do it, right? The other dichotomy one, what we often do is just let people be, and we just follow, go along with, and that's not very helpful when they need to change. So the other option is to guide, and guiding is one where we encourage, we motivate, we enlighten, we lay before, we accompany, we promote their autonomy, we elicit their solutions. And that's where MI fits in, motivational interviewing fits in. Here's the latest definition. So Bill Miller and Steve Rolnick back in the late 80s came up with this motivational interviewing, and they wrote a book together. And this is their 4th edition, which is actually, you could order it, but it's not printed yet. But this is what the latest short version of motivational interviewing is, a particular way of talking to people about change and growth to strengthen their own motivation and commitment. However, it takes a certain way of being with people. And so we're going to get right into what that way of being might look like. So we call it the spirit of motivational interviewing. It's the mindset, it's the heart set, it's the way we accompany the person. And it's one of total respect. It's one of being there as equals. So these are the 4 components to the spirit of motivational interviewing. We'll break it down here quickly, but this is the spirit. So it's partnership, acceptance, empowerment, and compassion. We're empowering people. Actually, they're empowering themselves, and we're evoking that empowerment from them. So partnership is, we're equals. In a way, they are the ones that are in control of their lives. In fact, they are the ones that have the power to do something to change. We don't, right? So it's like dancing instead of wrestling. Then there's acceptance, and with acceptance, we're looking at them in with absolute worth, and what we're looking at them as equals in some ways. In fact, they're the ones. So we're contemporaries, maybe they're younger. In my work, for instance, in Chicago schools, where I did lots of work with the more vulnerable students as a dropout prevention effort, and we use motivational interviewing, students would really feel like, hear this elderly white person, as I was getting closer to retirement a couple of years ago, was there in a community completely different. Now, I'm originally from South America, so I could easily relate to Latinx students, but you'd think that, well, I wouldn't be able to relate to maybe African American students. That was not the case, because with motivational interviewing, you're respecting their absolute worth and autonomy, and you're presenting yourself with accurate empathy and affirmation. And so let's look at each one of those. Well, let me just say that accurate empathy. So absolute worth is pretty straightforward. What I said is just total worth, right? Autonomy, we're going to get into more. Autonomy is very important for people to feel intrinsically motivated, and actually, without it, they're not going to make any behavior change. The accurate empathy is really being really able to actually tell people how they're feeling, read it in their nonverbals and in the way they say things, and understand where they're coming from. And then affirmation, or being affirmative, is really important to being positive, to open up the brain pathways. When people feel affirmed, it opens their thinking so that they feel good about themselves, and their amygdala turns itself off so they can think more clearly. So then there is empowerment. That's the other part of the spirit, the mindset, heart set that we're bringing to this. And we're helping people realize and utilize their own strengths and abilities by helping appreciate what they already have. So we like sort of put a mirror in front of them and say, check you out, and wow, you're and you show authentic interest and honor their autonomy and their competence. And the last one is compassion. So it's different than sympathy, because sympathy is paternalistic. It's looking down and saying, "Oh, you poor thing." That does not help in a conversation. Compassion is actually expressing kindness, empathy, showing genuine careness, and deliberately promoting their welfare and best interest. Some of these approaches are used in other fields. How you have conversations with people. Journalists are very good at this, and often, do have compassion. That's what motivates them. Salespeople sometimes in different fields might use some of the same techniques. The compassion piece is usually the one that's not there, because they want to make a sale if it's a lemon or not, if it's a car salesman or whatever. But so I wanted to share this one video. Here we have,
in MI, clients are always the experts on themselves,
Bill Miller,
on their own lives, on the direction they're going to take. Instead of I'm the expert on you, it kind of says, I don't know anything about you, and I need you to tell me who you are and what it is you want and where you're headed in life and what you care about, what you want for yourself and your family. Listening to people, understanding their perspective, understanding who they are and caring about how they look at the world and wanting to know and making them the expert on themselves. A very good way to counsel across differences of all kinds. So does respect for autonomy cross-culture pretty well, saying you're in charge of your life. I'm not. I don't get to decide for you.
So Bill there, who was the one that came up with motivational interviewing, and then Steve Rolnick helped to put it in a book, and maybe and over the years, this was, I think, their first book came out in 1989, and so they worked on it together, and then since then there's a whole group of trainers and providers who use MI who have contributed to the whole idea of motivational interviewing, and have made it richer, and it's expanded from its original addiction focus, because that's where it came out of, substance and alcohol addiction, and how you help people decide to go into treatment. Now it's being used across the board, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But the underlying concept of motivational interviewing is that when people are ambivalent, when they're sitting on the fence about change, should I not, I could, I might, but it really would help me out, it'd be better for me, it'd be better for my family. They're sitting on the fence, and they can sit on the fence forever. Sometimes, especially, people, some of us have more difficulty making decisions, but sometimes, especially when they're major decisions, it really helps to have another person help you. Also, people who have had traumatic experiences sometimes have a harder time making the connection. So having another person help them think, not telling them what to think, but helping them process their thoughts. And that's what we do with motivational interviewing. It helps them make a decision, and so that they can decide. Now, if providers, you and me, push them to change, right? So we tell them, you really need to do something about that, and we become the champion of their change, they're going to push back, right? If I was doing a workshop where it was more interactive, I would put you in pairs, and you would see the difference, what it feels like to be told what to do versus to help the person think what they should do about whatever issue they're needing to make a decision about to reach their goal. So what happens is, when you push, it creates relational discord between the provider and the client, and then that predicts lack of change. However, if instead we evoke from their mouth the change talk, as we call it, it will enhance behavior change, and they'll decide to do things. And it's amazing how fast people can move in that direction with just a little help, thinking it through. So motivational interviewing is a strength-based mindset. We're coming to it with this idea that this person has what it takes to do what's best for themselves. And so here's some ideas that come along with it, or that are compatible with it, that I use in my work, both in schools, in advocacy for children, and work in healthcare and corrections, is that we need to understand that humans all want what's best for themselves if they're in a good place, right? Now, they go in the opposite direction sometimes, when they feel coerced, when they feel like they're being oppressed, when they feel like they have no autonomy. However, if you give them that autonomy, if you give them clear thinking, they don't need to be convinced, right, to do what's best for themselves, their long-term success, their health. So we don't need to try to convince them to move in that direction. That's the direction they are going to want to move on their own, right? Just like you and me. So growth mindset, the idea that people with effort can change. Even intelligence is something that's not fixed. Carol Dweck, with her idea of, that intelligence, that people who have fixed mindsets hamper their development, because they just think that they're not good enough, and then they give up. But that growth mindset says it's about effort. Even intelligence, it's not something, if you don't use it, you lose it. So even if you're born talented, it doesn't get you very far if you don't use it. And so failure and mistakes are opportunities. Then the other idea is volition. How important make the person making their own autonomous decision making. That actually rewires the brain. It helps when people decide something, they're making they're perceiving themselves differently, and their brain now is actually rewired as to who they are, and they become truly motivated. Then there's the idea of how trauma is, how we work with people who have trauma. We do not want to harm them and to re-traumatize them. We don't want to bring up the trauma if they're not wanting to bring it up. With motivational interviewing, you're not going to traumatize people, because you're only reflecting what they tell you. Or you guess, but you're not going to guess things that are going to re-traumatize them. We're going to try to create safety, trustworthy, give them choice, collaboration, everything, and empowerment, everything that is trauma informed, counseling, conversations. is what motivational interviewing does. So it's a very good trauma-informed practice. And the last thing is, work that our minds work best with another mind. So thinking carefully sometimes requires another mind to help you process. And so that's just human brains, right? What I wanted to share is the idea that MI, motivational interviewing, is it evidence-based? And the reality is there's a lot of studies. Every year we get more and more. There's over 120,000 publications about motivational interviewing, and 2,000 are randomized control trials. And 200 approximately meta-analysis, which gathers up groups of those 2,000 randomized control trials and looks at, were they effective or not? How many of those studies showed that motivational interviewing was effective? And it's in various fields, in addictions, healthcare, mental health, corrections, and education, and more. And they find that it is. Even 15-minute encounters, 64% of the study showed that there was an effect. Now, that doesn't mean that other approaches don't work. The one thing that MI shows is that it can do things quicker, which is why help people get to change quicker than some approaches. And this is one that, you're helping people move in the direction of change, and you don't necessarily have to be the therapist that's doing that. It's not a therapy either. However, it helps people decide to move into change, which might require them therapeutic help. Now, here's one thing that I'd like to bring out, it's highlighted here, is that MI has twice the effect size. Now, this is a study, earlier study in 2005. And I'm sure it probably was mostly in the field of addictions, because that's at that point in 2005, it was mostly used in the field of addiction. But it found that had twice the effect size for African Americans, Latinx, and other minority populations than it did for mainstream white privileged people. So I guess they didn't say why that would be, because the study just looked at data. And if we could open it up, I would want to share some thoughts from people why you think this might be the case. If we have people in the audience who are Latinos or African American or minorities, you probably know why that's the case, right? What does it mean to be oppressed, to be marginalized? And that means you are stripped of your autonomy. The decisions, at least you have less feelings of autonomy, and you're controlled more, and that's what it means to be oppressed, right? And so I think what MI does is it reminds people that they are autonomous, and the provider is honoring that autonomy, honoring that help to help them think and decide for themselves. So I wanted to share this. These are the core skills. So you're going to see it's pretty simple. What we find is motivational interviewing is a simple idea, simple concept. However, it's a little harder than it seems. So it's simple, but not easy. So these are the 4 core skills, and I'm sure there are probably people attending this workshop that have already studied it or know about motivational interviewing. I was going to ask you early on, how many people had some knowledge of motivational interviewing, and I'm sure there are people present, and I wish it were a little more interactive, but webinars are harder to do that. So the first is the skill of open-ended questions. These all take skills to do, and we know we'll go through each one of these. And so the open-ended question is like questions that don't have one-word answers. We're going to get to that. Then we have affirming, the skill of affirming people, and we'll talk about why that's important. Why would it be important for people to feel affirmed? Then there's the reflective listening, and I would say that all these skills are really important. Reflective listening is the one we have least practice doing, and it's the one that actually in some ways can be very powerful in guiding the conversation. So that's, if there's one skill that you might want to practice as you want to incorporate motivational interviewing into your counseling or conversations you have with clients or participants, students, using reflective listening is a really powerful tool to help people process their thoughts makes them think easier than try to change their thought process by asking them a question. And then summarizing is really reflective listening, and then guiding that with a question. So it's a group of reflective listenings, what they've said, often the change talk they've said, and then a question that says, well, I'm wondering where that leads you. I wonder, so it transitions the conversation forward. We're guiding the conversation toward behavior change and toward planning. So these are some open-ended questions. Remember, these are not our questions that don't have yes and no answers, don't have one-word answers, because not that the one-word answer questions are bad. It's just that they're going to say yes or no, and now it's back on you, and you want to get more information. So you're helping people move ahead in their thought process of what they want to do with their careers. With what is your short-term goal? Goals are really good questions to ask because they usually motivate people to talk. So that's a real good one too. Yes. Wonderful. So I'm sure you all have ideas of what would be an open-ended question to talk them over. Let's get to affirming. Affirming is where we actually acknowledge, we shine a light and say, check you out. And it acknowledges people's effort, their values, their skills, their strengths. And when people, it's not praise, although it's very similar to praise. Praise is between you and the person, the client, and whenever they see you, they feel like you respect them and so forth. And that's good. There's nothing wrong with praise. It's a little that you're judging. They feel like they're being judged by you, and you've affirmed that you're. But with affirmations, instead, what you're doing is you're saying, this is who you are. You are a person. It's their self-concept backpack in a way that you're helping them put on. It's like, people know you as someone with these skills. Your effort is, your values are this. So you really care about your future. That's a simple kind of reflection that, or a simple kind of affirmation. This is about a value, right? They care. And most people do, right? So it's an easy one to do. So we would call that a simple affirmation. Look at how well you've done when you put in effort. Despite how hard it's been, you're not a person that just gives up. You're really committed. So these would be simple kind of affirmations you could give people. Once you know the person, once you know them better, you'll be able to give them more affirmations that are more specific about skills, about strengths, and so forth. Okay, then the one which is the big one, which is reflective listening. Now, reflective listening is one where we take the time to listen carefully. We listen so well that we can tell them back what they just said. So often in the simple reflections, which are perfectly okay, is we tell them back now what they said. It's almost not using usually the same exact words. We might paraphrase it and we might shorten it. But we give them back what we heard without taking it any further. So, and some people, when you're telling them that this is what you're doing, is like, well, they're going to laugh at you for telling them what they just told you. And in all my years, and I've been training and doing motivational interviewing with people for over 15 years, I've never had them tell me that or laugh. It's like, why are you copying me? Are you a parrot? No, they don't do that. In fact, what they usually say instead, if they're going to say anything about it, is, you really get me. So now the complex reflections are actually taking it a little further. And sometimes we get a little more mileage out of the complex ones because it guides the conversation a little further toward change. Because remember, we're helping them move in the direction that they want to move by helping them decide, what they want to do. So you pick out the change talk or the unstated emotion and you give it back to them. Or you guess what might be behind their thoughts by interpreting their nonverbal cues, their tone of voice, your suppositions about them. And so then you take that and you reflect. Here's an example of a client who says, I'm not sure I have the time or patience, but I'm thinking that if I could get into job training related to clean energy, I won't have to worry about a job. We'll get good pay and I'll feel good about what I'm doing. So a simple reflection would be, you're considering getting into clean jobs. You figure they'll be plentiful, lucrative, and it's good for society. So that would be a simple reflection. A more complex one, which in this case isn't that much different, but it goes just a little further. On the one hand, it will take real commitment. On the other, you figure it'll be worth it, pay as well as steady work-wise. And you want to do the right thing to address climate change. So now you're helping them, analyze the fact that it is going to take commitment, that it's not going to be easy for them to do. And so now they're going to go in the direction of discussing how they're going to think about maybe doing that, right? So both of them would be good, and they might get to the same place. We often do like to make the reflection shorter than we want to talk less than the client. So we often make the reflections as short as we can. So then we have summarizing, and that's the last. OARS are the 4 skills, if you remember, OARS. And the metaphoric bouquet is what we often say. Summarizing is sort of like walking through a field. So Bill Miller comes from Albuquerque, and they have now this time of the year in the spring, they get some rain, and so then the mountains and hills around that area get blossoms, and the wildflowers start blooming. And so he says it's the conversation is sort of like walking through a field of wildflowers, and you're picking certain flowers that go well together and creating a bouquet, and you're giving it back to the person. So the conversation is sort of like picking out certain parts of the conversation. Often it's we pick the change talk, and change talk is anything that suggests that the status quo, the way things are going now, aren't working. Anything that suggests that they wish, they're wondering if only things could get better, that change would improve it. That's change talk. So we basically review what's been said before, and you can decide. There could be summaries, and then along the way, but it's reflections, questions, reflections, question, and then summary, right? So the transition is to the next steps. Then the question, then after the summary, you ask a question. So I wonder where that leads you. So you give it to them in a package, and it helps them put it all together in their mind and say, wow, yes, I said all of that. Clearly, I need to do something about this. So what I wanted to mention about the 4 skills, that the one that we use the most, and in the first slide, there was some, let me just go back quickly to show you this. So at the bottom, it says, you're likely to do ORRRA, ORRORRRRAS. So this is not, it's not like that's a formula we use every time, but you're going to probably do some reflections early on. Maybe the A might go very soon, early on, right? It could be you start with an affirmation. They walk in the room and they're on time. It's like you're affirming you're really good at getting to things to your appointments on time, or that would be an affirmation you could start with. So it's not like this, but notice that we're doing mostly is reflections. So what you'll find, when you have conversations, if you ask too many questions, it costs a lot of mental work on the client, and they feel like they're being interrogated. and they might shut down. And so you want to avoid too many questions, and reflections can get very far. You can actually get as much out of a reflection often as a question. I wanted to share this theory, self-determination theory. Now, motivational interviewing did not come out of any theories. It came out of practice. What works? When Bill was using it, when he first started it, he was in an addiction training clinic, and they would tell him, "Oh, addicts, they just lie, and you can't believe them." But he had learned the Carl Rogers humanistic psychology, and with reflections and client-centeredness, and so he just used what he had learned, and he found that by respecting the clients, and by using certain things that we just are mentioning here, that actually the majority of the clients that he met with would decide to go into treatment. And other counselors would say, therapists would say, "What magic are you doing?" And so then he decided to figure it out. Now, he went on as a sabbatical to Norway, and the Norwegians, who are more Jungian, Freudian, they didn't have humanistic psychology, so they're very curious about that American approach. And so they were like, "Well, let's just have you role play." And so he actually, as they were role playing what he did, he started to realize that actually what he was teaching was different than what he was doing. And so then he named it motivational interview. So it came out of what worked, and it did not come out of any theory. However, about the same time as MI was he was creating MI, and then Steve Rolnick helped him. There's this theory that came out. It's called self-determination theory. I don't think he was familiar with it, but basically it says this, that all humans of all cultures and of all ages have 3 psychological social needs for healthy growth and development, and to be intrinsically motivated. So this is what we need to get from each other in order to grow healthy and develop, change, and to become intrinsically motivated. So we need to feel competent, just like each one of us, right? We want to feel like what we're doing well, that we can manage life's affairs, our work, that we're effective, that we're doing it right. And so we need interactions with others that tells us, that notices these strengths and abilities, where people affirm this. They're like, "Wow, you're amazing at that." And that makes us, oh, and that makes us feel good and, motivated. It's like, the other thing we need is a sense of belonging and caring, that we're contributing to as well as receiving from others. We're not, and some people need more of that than others. We all need it, right? We're social creatures. We need to feel accepted, integrated into social settings. And people get that in different places. It's really important in our work with clients that they feel that way with us. And there's that trust issue and caring that goes with that. And then the final one is autonomy. And we've talked about that earlier, how important that's feeling that you're not being controlled and that you're doing things of your own volition. So you're going to feel like you're acting out of your own interest and in your integrated values, and you don't want to feel like you're being controlled. And so if you manage to help people feel this way, it's going to intrinsically motivate them. So how do we do that with our clients? So that's the challenge with motivational interviewing, is figure out what to do and what not to do that interferes with this. Now, as you look at ORS, and I know I'm talking fast, I'm just trying to get as much through to you in the time we have together, so that you can actually start using this, hopefully. And we'll talk about maybe opportunities, how you can get more skilled at this. So O, for instance, is really good at helping to guide, because we're asking open questions, and we're giving them the autonomy to talk, and we're recognizing their competence and promote their autonomy. As someone who's really good as someone who's had effective job that did this, as someone, so you often can build into the question some honoring of autonomy and honoring of competence. We often then with affirmations, it's clearly you're affirming as their competence. So you're creating a relational bond when you do that, because people really feel, oh, you notice that about me, I like you. So there's this sense of relational bond. And then there's of course the reflections also, is like you're listening to what they're saying, you're asked there, and so you're thinking, so you're wondering, so you're in the middle of trying to decide what to do. And so your next steps are, you're trying to figure out what that might be. And so you're helping to reflect where their mind is. And it also can support this relational, when they feel like you really get them, it helps to do that. And then the summary, it's really guiding the conversation and helping them feel competent with their thoughts. And so self-determination theory, I think it really explains a lot why MI works. So the one other issue that I wanted to bring up was, how do we give people information or advice? This is really important, because when we give it to people in the wrong way, then they actually feel oppositional. It's like, oh, either they feel, what do you think, I'm stupid? So you're dishonoring their competence when you tell them, you know what you really should do. And it's like, well, shoot, I've thought of that myself. You think that I didn't think of that? So you want to make sure that you're giving information that really is needed. And then when the way we do it is very important, so that we're not stepping on their autonomy toes. So for instance, just think of, if you will think of an issue that you want to get better at in your own personal life, you want to get better at, or you want to change. Just whatever that is. Maybe it's, I want to get, be healthier. I want to get more exercise. I want to eat right. I want to, maybe you're worried about, these storms coming through. It's reminding us climate change is coming, and it's coming upon us, right? I'm, as an old science teacher, early on, I was science teacher, all about climate these days and what we need to do about it. But so you might want to, like, how do I lower my carbon footprint, right? And so now you got that. How do I do that? Now, if I'm here telling you, okay, this is what you need to do. You need to do this. You need to do, in addition to that, you need to do this and this. And when you do that, then of course you're going to get what you want. Now, as soon as you hear me telling them, your mind is like telling you, your mind is probably saying, you don't even know me, and you're telling me what will work for me. And that's, every human mind is like that. Now, sometimes we're open, especially if you feel a sense of, of, of relations with someone who cares about you, and they give you advice, that you don't mind it so much. And some people are less allergic to that, and don't mind having people suggest things. They know ultimately they're in charge. So, but sometimes it's really important to give people advice, right? And so we want to do it in this way. So we ask them what they know first before we even consider giving them advice. Once we realize that they for sure need to know, and sometimes it's stuff that they wouldn't know. Maybe it's how you can help them in your role that they don't know. So do you mind if do you know how I can help you in my role here at this institution? What, or do you know some information on how long you need to, will be helping you, whatever it is. So some of the information is just information that you almost don't need to ask them permission. So, because it's not about them changing, it's not about behavior, it's more about information. But if it's about anything that they're going to have to change, then you want to ask permission. Do you mind? Can I give you some information of what's worked for other people? Can I share, what some people in your situation have done to deal with their issue? Then you provide the information. So you elicit, you ask them permission, you provide the information. So you give them the advice. Now, if it's advice, you might want to give more than one, just like, so they don't feel like you're trying to push them in that direction. Some people find this useful, some people find this. So you provide the information, if you can, options. And then the last thing you do is, and the real important is, what do you think? You want to get feedback back, what they think of what you contributed. Was that helpful? Is there, would any of those options be something you consider? You know, something like that. So that's how we give information and advice. We do not want to get the fixing reflex where we try to solve their problem. Because if we tell people without doing it this way, we give them information or advice without asking permission, we're getting into the fix it mode, or what we call sometimes the writing reflex, writing with an R, getting them right, but we're trying to fix their problem for them, and it's the wrong mouth doing the talking. So what motivational interviewing is all about is being the right mouth doing the talking. So the 4 tasks that we need to do in MI. So this is a big picture. So you're meeting with them. This is now, you got the skills, you got the right spirit, right? You know how you're going to be present with them. You're going to have this whole sense of acceptance. You're going to really honor their autonomy. You're going to look at them with curiosity and undivided attention. So you're going to be there, the right spirit. Then you're going to have these core skills. You're going to use the ORS, AORS. And now you know how to give advice if they need it. Now let's look at the conversation as a whole. So they come into your office, it's the first time, maybe you've met them, you're going to be wanting to engage with them. And engaging is basically asking the question, shall we work together? You know, can I be of help to you? You know, and it's introduction. They're coming into the room a little like, I don't know if I want to be here. I don't know if I want to talk to this person. Is this going to be safe for me? Is this going to be, depending on your role, as soon as you start giving the spirit of MI, they're going to let down their guard and be more comfortable, right? Which is what you want to do to help them think clearly. Then the next thing is focus. What are they going to talk about? You're not going to only talk. The early on, the engaging part is you're finding out about them, all about them, but it's curiosity. Is like, tell me about yourself. You know, what do you care about? What do you like to do with your time? What is your long-term goals? Those kind of things. These are engaging. What could be better for you? And now they might be in your room for a specific reason, and it's pretty straightforward. You know what the conversation is going to be and the focus is going to be there. That's clear. And then you still are going to get engaged, but you're going to know what the focus is. Evoking is why do you want to do this change? What are the things that would help you get there? And then how are you going to do it? So let's look at each one of these. Now, this is like going up stairs. You're getting to the plan. They're sequential. One, start with engage, 20% of the time. We'll talk about that. Then we're going to focus on one topic. What is their goal? What do they want to get better at? What they want to do? Then we're going to evoke from them, draw from them, and then finally help them come up with a plan. Never doing this for themselves, always helping them do it for themselves. So it's sequential, but it's also recursive in that even when we're doing the plan, we're going to be engaged with them. We're going to be focused on what the goal is. We're going to be evoking from them their solutions, their steps to make it happen. It's when we're evoking, we're going to keep the focus, don't want to wander off. We want to continue to be engaged. So it's recursive as well. So let's look at the relational foundation, the engaging part. That's the first part. You first meet with them 20% of the time. You know you're going to have 20 minutes. You're going to spend about 3 or 4 minutes at least talking to them about themselves, who they are as a person, what they want for themselves, and whatever they want to share. You're trying to draw from them, get some sense of things that you can affirm, who they are, where they want to go in life. And then you're going to use always showing curiosity and focus, listening reflectively, ORS, listening, telling them back what you heard, not asking question, just one question, reflection, they talk, oh, reflection, they talk, oh, affirmation, before you come up with another question, possibly. You show deep interest about the person. The next one is focusing, and then what should we talk about? So you can either agree. So you can either say, what do you think? What would be helpful to talk about? Now, this is when it's a little more open what you're there for. But even if you're specifically wanting to help them in one way, if something is bothering them, you want to get to that first. If something is concerning, they need to go that, because they're not going to be able to process their thoughts about something else. Whatever is most pressing is going to be really important. And you want to see if that's something that in your role you can be of help with, at least helping them think it through, and then maybe moving on to the other topic that maybe you're supposed to be talking about. But then the other is you can tell them, we can talk about this topic, this topic, this topic. I'm wondering which one you want to start with, which one would be most important today. Maybe we can pick up the next one later on. So then that's agreeing to a focus. So then the next one is the task of evoking, which is we're preparing them for change. So we're trying to evoke their thoughts, evoke change talk, help them think about why the reasons, the desires, the reasons, the abilities, the need to change, why they would want to. So we have strategies to evoke change talk. So if I were in a workshop, I'd give you some strategies to help you, move the conversation and help people in their thinking process. And then the final one is the one bridges to change. So what we're trying to do is coming up with a plan, but we're trying to increase during that evoking part, to increase change talk and decrease sustained talk. Sustained talk is not doing anything different, staying the same. And if they're stuck, they're going to stay stuck. If they're in a problem situation, they're not going to get out of it without some decisions on their part. And so you're helping them increase their change talk. Now, what happens when we do hear change talk, or what we call commitment language, which is change talk at the next level higher, which is I'm going to do something about it. I will. You hear the word will or a synonym to that. So we're going to do ors, but maybe not in the same order. Mostly we want to reflect it, restate it back. We might not do it immediately. You might we want them to be the champion of their change. So we're not going to jump on the conversation saying, oh, so you want to change. Oh, that's great. We don't want to be the cheerleader for the change. If anything, we're going to you're starting to think that maybe change would work for you, would be good for you. Doing this differently would be best for you, instead of us being the champion of their change. So we want to lower that excitement, even though in your own mind you're like, yes, I'm helping them to get to where they need to get to or want to get to, because ultimately it's what they want to do. You might ask for examples. So it's an open question. Well, can you give me examples of when you've made a change in the past and it was difficult like this one and you were able to succeed? Or you might ask a question like elaboration. Well, tell me more. They're talking about change. Tell me more. So, they're going to continue talking about change. Or you might affirm it as like, I'm hearing that you're really committed to making something change happen here for yourself. You're affirming their effort, their belief about what they want to do. Or you might summarize. So you said this, so then now they say this change talk and you bring it together with some of the other change talk that they made. And now you give it to them in a package. And then you ask that question, transition question, where would that lead you now that you've said this, this, and this? So then you do that. So the path is the motivational interview, you want to get to their change talk, their desire, their ability, their reasons, their needs. Then we start hearing commitment language, which means let's start planning, and then you create a plan. So the planning part is actually the bridge to change. And so that's where we're going to help them. Again, we want them to come up with their plan, not us, right? So we're going to use basically a SMART plan, where you've probably seen those before, the kind where you're being very specific, wanting to be measurable, you want to make it achievable and relevant and time specific. So it's a SMART. Basically, it's this kind of thing where you're going to ask these journalistic kind of questions. Well, what, where, when, how much, how often would you plan over the next week or 2 weeks? So what's something you want to do? So you're helping them think this through. You're not giving it to them. Even right here, you could screw up the whole conversation. And if you screw up, you then backtrack and then you have to apologize. I'm sorry. I'm trying to tell you what to do. It's not my role to do that. You're the one that needs to decide. So here you're helping them think for themselves how they're going to pull it off. Here's a little skill that it works here, but also early on. It's called the confident ruler, but you can also use it early on as the importance ruler. It's a nice little way of evoking change talk. And since we have a minute, I can, before I have to open up for questions, is you ask the question, how important is it for you to accomplish in this? Or in this case, how confident are you that you'll accomplish the entire plan once they've come up with a plan? And they're going to give you a number. So if it was the importance ruler, how important is it early on before you're in the action plan? They'll give you a number like, how important is it for you to reach this goal for yourself, and or quit smoking, to get a new job, to get better training, to whatever it is, to do better, complete your probation, whatever it is, right? So how important is it for you to do this on time? And they're going to give you a number. So let's say they gave you a 6 or a 7, whatever number. Maybe they give you an 8 or a 9. How important? Or how confident? They're going to give you that number. And then you're going to ask them, well, why did you pick that number? Why did you pick an 8 and not a 7 or a 6? Why did you pick an 8 and not a lower number? You can pick any number. Why did you pick an 8 and not a 5? Well, they're going to say, well, it's more important than 5. I said 8 because it's important. I'm confident, that more confident than 5. I'm 8 confident, right? Or it's important. And so now they're changing. They're talking change talk. What we want to do is help people expand the amount of change talk that they're making, and as they hear themselves talk, they actually convince themselves that change is important, more important to them. So that's basically, in a nutshell. We want to talk less than the person. We want to offer 2 to 3 times more reflections than questions. So too many questions is a problem. So 2 to 3 times more reflections than questions. And then we want to mostly ask open questions rather than yes and no answered questions. Now, that last question we ask on the scale 1 to 10 is a closed question, but we follow it up with an open question. And then we listen empathically by using complex reflection. So we want to listen, put ourselves in their shoes, like, how must this feel? Not get buried in their emotions necessarily, because you want to be present with them, but you want to then give it back to them what they heard. And then we want to use strategies to evoke change talk and help them with hope, help them develop. And all this is stuff that, of course, we don't have time to cover here. So I want to share a song for the last minutes. We have, this is Otis Redding's song, and I want you to think. The song, let's pretend it was just a conversation between you and him. And this is how the song is basically a conversation, and you're gonna try to come up with an affirmation for him. I'm gonna shine a light in his face and say, check you out, So let me get the song moving here. And then the other is a reflection. What would be a decent reflection to give him? It's like telling him, what he's feeling, So let's go with the song and see if anybody can do that. Give us an affirmation or a reflection. All right, here we go.
Sitting in the morning sun, I'll be sitting in the evening come, watching the ships roll in, then I'll watch them roll away again. Yeah, I'm sitting on the dock of the bay, watching the tide roll away. Ooh, just sitting on the dock of the bay, wasting time. I left my home in Georgia, headed for the Frisco Bay. I've had nothing to live for. It looked like nothing's gonna come my way. So I'm just gonna sit on the dock of the bay, watching the tide roll away. I'm sitting on the dock of the bay, wasting time. Look like nothing's gonna change. Everything still remains the same. I can't do what 10 people tell me to do. So I guess I'll remain the same. Yes, sitting here resting my bones. And this loneliness won't leave me alone. Listen, 2,000 miles I roam just to make this dock my home. Now I'm just gonna sit at the dock of a bay, watching the tide roll away. Ooh, I'm sitting on the dock of a bay, wasting time.
Maybe you can whistle. All right. All right. So maybe does someone want to, why don't you put in the chat, what would be an affirmation we could give? It's good to come up with affirmations early on when we're starting to talk to somebody. Affirm them so it develops that alliance with them, that sense of, you know, I get you, and I'm respectful of you. Like, check you out. I mean, clearly Otis Redding was an amazing musician.
And Richard, we can unmute people too if they
that'd be great.
If they want to raise their hand, we can unmute them.
That'd be perfect. Should I stop sharing?
No, you don't need to.
Okay. So anybody want to, you know, what could we affirm? Anybody? Maybe you can say your name real quickly and where you're calling from. I know people can be bashful, but.
So if you want to just raise your hand, I can unmute you, or you can feel free to participate in the chat.
In the chat too. Anybody want to put in the chat? What could we affirm here? Like, where did he come from? How far did he come from? So
he came from Georgia.
Came from Georgia, and that's all the way to Frisco Bay. And how many miles does it say?
2,000. We have in the chat, somebody typed 2,000.
Yeah, so 2,000 miles away. So you can, that's effort he put into. So we can affirm that. It's like, Otis, you're really committed to making it for yourself, making it, and you left your home 2,000 miles away, and here you are, and you put all this effort in. You want to be in a good place. You want to, as a musician, you want to get out there. And now, how is he feeling? So now reflection. What is he feeling like? Anybody?
Maybe some people are typing, but
Yeah,
he's feeling lonely.
Definitely. He's definitely, yeah, nothing's going his way. He's feeling like there's nothing to live for because, you know, he thought, you know, he's hoping for more than this. Now he's just sitting at the dock of the bay watching the tide roll in and out and ships go in and out. And in fact, notice that 10 people told him what to do, right? 10 people. You think that one of those ideas would have been good? Yeah, he feels wasting time. But what's the problem when people tell you what to do? Right away, your brain goes, they don't know me. And it's not your idea. It's the wrong mouth doing the talking. And so he pretty much wrote off all those ideas. Now, there's a good chance that now that you're asking him what he thinks might work, there at least would have been one idea you think in that 10 that might have been decent. So you might say, well, I wonder, you know, so then the open question that you would ask after, he feels like he's wasting time. Yeah, then he would probably, it's too many ideas. Yeah. And the ideas are not ones he came up with. It's the wrong mouth doing the talking. But there might have been a good idea in the bunch. So he might rescue one. It's like maybe one of them was, there's this open mic down at this one bar. I wonder if, I wonder, do you mind if I share an idea? And then he says, okay, yeah, there's this open mic, at this bar, and you know and that might be an opportunity if you wanted to like show them your stuff, and so what do you think? And so then he might turn around. Yeah, so it's not sure. The one thing is when you guess things, and they'll correct you, and often they won't hold it against you, right? Very often. So if you step on their toes in any way, and you can interpret that, usually an apology works pretty well, because we're used to not communicating well with people. Like, people say things we don't understand. So often, if we tell people by mistake what to do, it's like, oh, I just told them what to do. Sorry, that's not my role. I need to apologize. You're the one that needs to decide. So, well, good. So that's what we're at today. Is the competencies for learning MI is we got the core skills down. We're starting to recognize what change talk is. We haven't talked about the things to avoid. We've talked about the fixing reflex. So that's one of various traps, and too many questions would be another trap that we've talked about. How do we elicit, evoke, and strengthen change talk, soften, sustain talk, develop a change plan, and consolidating commitment? So there's some work there. So we need some more strategies to learn, maybe, and you can do this by either on your own. So you can go to some sites. There's motivationalinterviewing.org, which is a site that has some resources on it, a website that I created for schools. So I co-authored a book with Steve Rolnick on motivational interviewing for schools. A lot of my work has been in schools and universities. I worked at Northeastern for 26 years, and we incorporated motivational interviewing in many of our programs, which many of them were in schools, or with the university counseling and jobs programs. So you might want to sign up for trainings. There's trainings that you can find here, or maybe there'll be other opportunities in the future. You could get a book. There are these books, and I just wanted to share, if you do want to get a book, here's the discount code that Guilford Press has shared with me for people who have been in my workshop. So if you use this, you should be able to get 20% discount and free shipping. So this is Guilford Press. This book is there's a 4th edition. It'll be coming out soon. This is a book that I co-authored. This is a book on skills, which will help you, and while the other one's healthcare. So that's I think all I have to share. Here's my and I can put it in the chat too. If you want to reach me, you can do so. I'll give you my, and you'll have these handouts. So you can reach me this way, and there's my cell number. But I'm happy to answer any questions you might have, suggestions. Yeah, so there's the humility. So there's some more workshops in June and July. So be on the lookout.
Great.
All right.
So much, Richard. We really appreciate your information today on motivational interviewing. And just like Richard said, there is going to be further motivational interviewing Workforce Wednesday webinars in June and July. So be on the lookout for that to register. I'm going to go ahead and put in the chat the follow-up survey for today. So if you have
questions too, right?
Yeah, we're going to do questions. If you have a brief moment, we would love for you to take the follow-up survey. And then we have the rest of today until 2:30 for any questions or discussion that you'd like to have. So you can feel free to raise your hand and we can unmute you, or you can participate in the chat and we'll make sure that Richard answers those questions. Richard, we did have one question earlier on that says, how would you describe your work environment? Is this a question for you, Oyata? I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name, but they might have been answering one of the activities in your presentation, I think maybe actually.
Yeah, so it could be the question is, how would you do, that's an open question. How would you describe your work environment, so that you're trying to get a sense, what their work is like, so that you're talking about that. So that was probably an open question that they would ask.
Yeah.
There is a question from BX, which is, how can you motivate an antisocial individual who lacks interpersonal skills? So, we're challenged. The good thing about motivational interviewing is we're starting with where they're at. That's why it's useful even with children. And you're not gonna have the same kind of reflections and guide the conversation in the same way as you would an adult. But also somebody who's got specific, deficiencies, or just their personality is some way. The one thing motivational interviewing is we help to draw out. Now, what it's hard to know how people will react. Now, silence is not a bad thing. Sometimes people need more time to, when you reflect, you don't want to like make them feel uncomfortable and look at them like, okay, tell me, I'm waiting on you. You want to, in your nonverbal, what I often do when people are not very talkative, is to just relax and look up, maybe put my position in a pensive place. Now, antisocial individuals, can be challenging, right? So, I mean, on the other hand, they may be responding to how they're feeling. Clearly, they are, but I'm wondering, maybe as you move along, if the relationship grows, if that kind of antisocial behavior will start getting softer, and it's hard to know. I would say try using some of these skills of MI and see if that antisocial kind of behavior gets better, by just reflecting, putting yourself. So, I mean, you could pretend to be, if you wanted to unmute, you could pretend to be this antisocial individual. Know that when we play a role play and it's with someone that you haven't necessarily used MI, and maybe you have, I don't know that, then that person might, you could be stuck with this person being adamantly that. But if you wanted to unmute, unless there are other questions, you could pretend to be an individual like that, and I could model a little MI if you want.
Yeah, if they want to participate, you can raise your hand and then I'll unmute you.
So sometimes people who are on the spectrum, have less ability. On the other hand, they have sometimes more ability, right? Depending on what it is. And so you can affirm them, but they might have, their communication ability might be hampered. So we work with people where they come from, where they're at. And sometimes it might even be using different ways. We blend MI with other approaches too. MI is just one approach. In fact, we know that MI works best when blended with other approaches that are also evidence-based. So if other evidence-based practices actually get better when you use MI, because it honors the autonomy and gets people intrinsically motivated, that's probably why. And MI is often, gets more mileage out of it when you blend it with other approaches. So in my work, we blended MI with what we call experiential education or adventure therapy in schools with students who were very vulnerable, who were having lots of problems, who had traumatic life experiences or whatever. And we found that it was very effective to do it together, even to help prevent violence when there was, in some cases, we had situations where one student in the school was killed by another student, and all their peers from both sides were ready to. That was the environment in those hallways was really, really hard and really dangerous in some ways. So we took those friends of the victims, and we did motivational interviewing, and we did adventure therapy kind of conversations with them, and using trust games and activities to just get them in a good place to be able to think clearly and not make the mistake of thinking that vengeance was going to be the solution. And so it worked really well to combine that. Then when we met individually with them, I had a team of graduate students helping me, and it helped them to forget about vengeance as the way of solution. That was only, they realized that would only perpetuate the violence. I don't know if that was helpful, that answer, but if anybody wants to contact me, you have my email, you have my phone number, happy to do so. I'm a retiree from the state of Illinois, so I feel indebted to the state.
Thank you so much, Richard. We really appreciate your time today and the information. Again, I did put the survey link in the chat. If you have a minute for the follow-up survey, we would greatly appreciate it. And then also, I'm sorry?
No, thank everyone for being here today, because you're doing important work, I'm sure.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much. And then also just another disclaimer. Unfortunately, my internet connection did go out momentarily while you all were still on the Zoom webinar. So please allow a couple of extra working business hours for the recording, as I'll have to edit the two recordings together. So gotta love the internet and all the storms that are happening across Illinois today. So. All right, I don't see any other questions in the chat, Richard, do you?
No, I don't.
All right, well, thank you so much, Richard. And we will have the slide deck and the resources that Richard was talking about provided to you on the webinar following today's session. And then if you have any other follow-up questions, feel free to reach out to him or me, and I can direct you on where to go. And then again, we will be having further motivational interviewing Workforce Wednesday webinars coming this summer. Thank you all so much for your time this afternoon. Have a great rest of your Wednesday.
Thank you, everyone.